We run through polling today because there's new polling exclusively shared with GB News reveals that Labour's red wall is at risk of crumbling, with nearly a third of Labour voters now regretting their 2024 election choice.
Indeed, that includes 58% of people who say that Labour has badly misjudged the impact of migration.
Meanwhile, a separate poll this morning has Reform on a 10-point lead ahead of Labour, and that mirrors their success at the local elections.
And the frustration isn't just from voters. Take a listen to what former Transport Secretary Louise Haigh has been telling GB News.
Margaret Thatcher. She used to like picking battles. Why was she right to do so? Yeah, why was that good politics?
Margaret Thatcher is a perfect example of that because she drew her strength from that conflict. But that meant that people knew exactly who she was and what she was for. Banning fire and rehire is just almost as popular with Reform voters as it is with Labour ones. But they're just not hearing it at the moment because we're not taking the fight to them. We're not taking the fight, I don't think, to Reform on those issues.
Well, let's get the thoughts of the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. What do you make of this, Tom? I mean, it's fascinating to see the results of this poll and then pair it against Louise Haigh saying, and essentially saying people don't know what Keir Starmer stands for.
No, absolutely. I mean, I, like the both of you, I'm sure, was shocked to find out that Keir Starmer has proven to be very unpopular, that a lot of people think he's making an absolutely terrible go of it. As you've already pointed out there, almost a third of Labour voters at the last election saying they now regret their vote. That's twice the proportion of Conservative 2024 voters who regret their vote, much more than that for Liberal Democrat voters. It's clear where the movement is. It's away from the Labour Party and two parties, some of them on the Liberal left, but also particularly on the right as well. It's so clear now, if it wasn't clear back after the election, that this majority that Keir Starmer has is a kind of a bit of a sandcastle. We won it on a very low voter turnout. We also won it on a very low vote share, historically low for a majority government. And it's now been found out as soon as there was a kind of viable alternative in the form of Reform, and as soon as people who felt compelled to get behind the Labour Party last time around because they just wanted to kick out the Tories started to look elsewhere. We've ended up in a situation where we are now, where we've never really had a government that has fallen from grace in voters' eyes this quickly after winning a majority government. So that's very, very telling for just how badly Keir Starmer has handled the past.
You mentioned the way that voters are now looking. Obviously, we've got this new poll out today. Reform UK surges to 10-point poll lead over Labour. If we'd have thought about this before that general election, I think a lot of people wouldn't have believed you, would they? It's quite shocking, isn't it, to see a party other than Labour and the Conservatives coming forward with such strides.
No, absolutely. It's not an exaggeration to say that the kind of poll showings that we're seeing for Reform at the moment, its results at the local elections recently. This is the most serious challenge to the two-party system that we've had for 100 years. We've had a century of Labour and the Tories really maintaining a kind of monopoly over British politics. They now together can't even make up 50% of the vote. So whilst it's still early days, one wouldn't want to say that Reform is nailed on to have a particularly good showing at the next election. A lot can happen over the course of the next few years. But at the same time, this really shows that the system that we've been used to is really breaking down. And at the very least, things are far more volatile. Voters are far more up for grabs, far more willing to defect and take a chance on something new than they have been previously.
Which begs the question, I mean, if Louise Haigh and others are saying Keir Starmer needs to take some stronger action, what does it say for Kemi Badenoch and the Tories? Because in the interview with GB News, Boris Johnson was sort of saying Reform won't be a problem by the next election. People will come back to the Conservatives because they ultimately trust us because there's history. Is he right?
I think that's just the kind of complacency that has got the Tory party into this mess. At the last election, that again was a historic rout for them. And I think this mentality that both Labour and the Tories have had in relation to their traditional social bases is that they'll come home for their dinner eventually. You can't count on that anymore. I think Brexit in particular put a coach and horses through the kind of traditional coalitions of those two parties, and everyone's up for grabs now. So I think this idea that if we just sit it out and wait, hope Reform implode, then the Tories feel like they can slip back in. I just think that's the mark of incredible complacency, to be frank.
I think if you take a look at the elections last week, I was at Runcorn and Helsby, you take a look at that, it just goes to show, doesn't it, that, like you said, it's not just a two-horse race anymore. Reform clearly are becoming a party that voters feel that actually what Labour and the Conservatives might be lacking, Reform might have something to offer instead.
No, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's going to be an additional boost for reform is the fact that the more they rack up these poll leads and the more you see them having local election success and whatever, people start to think this isn't a wasted vote anymore.
Yeah.
You've now seen Reform very cleverly flip the Tories' old attack line on them. You know, a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. Now you've got Reform saying a vote for the Conservatives is a vote for Labour. And there's a lot of truth in that if you look at many of those results. So this momentum, you know, provided there isn't some kind of catastrophic blow-up, it kind of just fuels itself over time, doesn't it?
That's the problem, isn't it? Because at the moment, Reform does seem, I mean, it's hugely successful, but is it a little bit delicate? I mean, it's not. It won't take much the way it is at the moment. It hasn't got enough structure, has it, to stop it imploding?
No, it's very early days, as you say, but I think what has been interesting is the difference between last summer and these local elections. The amount of party organisation which has clearly gone into this, led by their relatively new chairman, Zia Youssef, the fact that they've got a ground game now. These are things that the kind of predecessors to Reform, whether it was the Brexit Party or UKIP, never really properly developed. So, as you say, it's still early days, it's still fragile, but on that point of professionalising, building party structure, etc., they certainly seem to be heading in the right direction for themselves.
A lot of people might argue that confidence is kind of all smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of bravado there. Obviously, on the night of the election, Zia Youssef said that it was going to completely change the way our political system in the UK works. It did seem that on the night, as Labour kind of seemed to match them, that confidence wavered. But ultimately, we saw the pictures of Nigel Farage coming in with their candidate Sarah Poachin, the same Farage that we always see. Is it all bravado, or is there a real sense within the party and the outside of the party, I assume, that actually they could do some real damage?
They've certainly got an opportunity, and I think those local elections basically couldn't have gone any better for them. I mean, you know, north of 650 seats, taking control of 10 councils, the by-election victory, the 2 mayoralties, and also if you look about where they were winning, in heavily working class areas, they're picking up about 40% of the vote. They are clearly a threat to Labour. Taking control of Durham County Council, which has been essentially continuously under Labour control since the 1920s. There is so clearly an opening here to kind of reassemble that sort of Brexit coalition which delivered the referendum result and the Boris Johnson Conservative majority. They are clearly in the process of doing that.
But what astounds me with all of this is that neither of the two big parties, I mean, we can't even call them that, but the parliamentary big parties at least, haven't looked at this and said, the problem we've got is we're not listening to the people, which is, you know, and whether you agree with politics to the right or the left, you've got to listen to the electorate, and Reform do seem to be the only ones doing that at the moment.
No, absolutely, and you see it also in the polling that's been shared with GB News. The two key issues at the moment are cost of living and immigration. On the cost of living, 62% of voters think Keir Starmer doesn't get it. On immigration, it's 58%. That's about as damning as it gets. And I think the Tories, their problem is they're just sort of not on the field at all in some respects. People have kind of forgotten about them, or they continue to associate them with the failures of the past 14 years, quite understandably, because they were running the country. So, as you say, it is about listening to voters, and there's a sense that the two main parties definitely aren't doing that.
Well, all we get from the Tories is we're under new management. No one's told us what the new management is going to do.
Red Wall MPs this week have written to Keir Starmer, haven't they, though, to say that actually he's done great work abroad, he's done great work on foreign policy, but he now needs to turn to home soil. They want Keir Starmer to take a stronger approach to try and get voters back on side, because, as you rightly say, people have got buyer's remorse. They don't necessarily feel that the party have listened to them.
No, absolutely. And I think the difficulty is Keir Starmer the person to get us back on track? There's often a lot of discussion about, should you get rid of Ed Miliband, should you get rid of Rachel Reeves? I think that the fish is rotting from the head down in many respects. He is a uniquely inept politician. You get the sense that he's listened to what the focus groups have said, but he struggles to find a language to talk to voters' concerns, even just rhetorically. And is this the person who has the flexibility to change course and to try and appeal to the people that they're losing? I don't think he's even capable of that, to be perfectly frank.
But he has got, determination in some fields, one of which is Ukraine. He's in Ukraine at the moment.
Absolutely.
Coalition of the willing. Is it going to make any difference? Is that some bravado from European leaders, sort of necessary bravado, if you like, to Putin?
I mean, there is a little bit of that. I mean, this is sort of the problem with how European powers have generally handled the Ukraine issue, is that they speak mainly in sound bites, in tweets and photo ops. And I think this is a bit of an example of that. They are going to Kiev, as you say, today. You've got the Polish Prime Minister, you've got the new German Chancellor, you've got Keir Starmer, and they're going to do one of these little photo ops to kind of mirror the fact that you had various kind of like Putinist figures being invited to Moscow to celebrate the E-Day celebrations there.
George Galloway included.
Absolutely, which will be a shock to no one who knows anything about George Galloway. But at the same time, this is these decisions are being made elsewhere. They're pushing for Trump's suggestion of an unconditional 30-day ceasefire. But I doubt, again, another photo op in Kiev will have Putin or anyone else quivering in their boots.
All right, Tom, thank you. That leads us to our poll of the day today. And if there was a ceasefire agreed, could you trust Putin to honour it? That's what we're asking you today. You can scan the QR code on your screen if you're watching on TV, or if you're listening on the radio, good morning. Go to gbnews.com/poll.